Hello and welcome to this new episode, episode number 2 for the history of consciousness. So now to Carl Jung and individuation, but also to alchemy, because I will also bring up simultaneously the alchemical terms. You can already see here nigrido, albedo, citrinitas, and rubido, and the Jungian terms linked to it. And on the left side here, the prima materia, the yin-yang, where everything comes from, and the splitting of the different into the different elements, the different parts and archetypes, and then trying to combine these again into a whole. But before I'm going to talk about individuation in a Jungian sense, which consists of shadow work, anima, animus work, and continual journey to the self, I want to bring up once more why I am using this specific work of individuation. Firstly, as this lens gives the symbolic lens needed to add another modern layer to the historical context that we'll be going through in the rest of the course. So it can act as a red line throughout the course. But also, through in the introduction, talking about this Jungian lens, be able to show throughout the course how these different historical concepts and really like how they connect together when it specifically comes to individuation and the deeper archetypal layer underneath everything that will be shown. So regarding Carl Jung, I want to talk about Carl Jung's own lens and then the alchemy base, which he also worked from, because he extensively also looked into alchemy. Firstly, shadow work. So shadow work is a term used in Jungian psychology to describe the process of exploring, understanding, and integrating the darker or shadow aspects of one's personality. This includes aspects of oneself that are repressed, denied, or rejected, such as negative emotions, unconscious biases, and traumatic experiences. The goal of shadow work is to bring these unconscious aspects of oneself into conscious awareness, really, in order to integrate them into one's sense of self. And this can lead to a greater sense of self-awareness and personal growth, as well as a reduction in symptoms such as anxiety and depression. And signs of a successful integration of the shadow might include an increased sense of self-awareness, a greater capacity for empathy and compassion, a reduction in destructive behavior, and a greater sense of inner peace and well-being. On the other hand, because I want to bring that up as well, if one embraces the shadow, it involves giving into darker impulses and desires without any attempt to understand or integrate them. This can lead to a decline in self-control and an increase in negative behavior. Signs of embracing the shadow might include a decline in empathy and compassion, an increase in destructive behavior, and a general sense of inner turmoil and dissatisfaction. So, this is good to see like how to know really like if one really is integrating the shadow or just embracing the shadow. And there are a variety of techniques that can be used for shadow work, including journaling, therapy, dream work, and active imagination, to just name a few. And these techniques can help individuals become aware of their shadow material and begin to process and integrate it. It's also important to note that shadow work is not easy and can be emotionally really difficult. Then next is anima and animus work. Anima and animus work from a Jungian perspective refers to the process of integrating and understanding the feminine and masculine aspects of the self, also known as the anima and the animus. So the masculine and the feminine principles. So the anima represents the unconscious feminine tendencies and emotions, and the animus represents the unconscious masculine tendencies and emotions, and also thoughts for both of them. Anima work involves becoming aware of and integrating the animus into the conscious self. So animus work as well. Really, in that sense, haha. So animus and animus work, which can help in understanding and relating to the opposite gender, as well as gaining a deeper understanding of oneself. This can be done through various methods such as active imagination, dream work, therapy as well. It can also involve exploring and embracing traditionally feminine or masculine qualities that may have been repressed or denied. And this type of animus work can also help in relationships really, as it can lead to greater understanding and empathy towards the opposite sex, and can help in resolving inner conflicts and tension, but also same sex similarly. And it can also help in finding balance and wholeness within oneself. Successful integration of the anima or animus is characterized by a greater sense of wholeness and balance within the self. The individual has a better understanding and acceptance of their own feminine or masculine aspects, and is able to, express both sides of their personality with ease. This integration often leads to improved relationships both with others and with the self, as well as a greater ability to navigate the world with empathy and understanding. Some signs of successful animus or anima integration include things such as improved relationships with others, as the individual is able to understand and relate to both men and women in a more empathetic and understanding way. But also increased emotional intelligence and empathy, as the individual is able to understand and navigate their own emotions and the emotions of others more effectively, a more balanced expression of both feminine and masculine qualities, leading to a greater authenticity and self-confidence, a greater ability to navigate life's challenges and make decisions based on a deeper understanding of both their own motivations and the motivations of others, a greater sense of inner peace and self-acceptance, as the individual is able to integrate both the light and dark aspects of their personality. And finally, the self. When it comes to that, it's really about working with the wise old man or wise old woman, which is really an archetypal expression of the self. And really it refers to the process of exploring and integrating the wisdom and guidance of the inner self, or often also called higher self by people. And this can involve journaling, therapy, meditation, and other forms of self-reflection to help bring this aspect of the self to consciousness and integrate it into the whole self, or to really go towards this center of wholeness, which is kind of at the same time a kind of everything in of itself. At the same time, there's the alchemy layer as well. So looking in alchemy, I'm gonna talk about the alchemical terms, but also from a Jungian lens. So in Jungian psychology, the concepts of salt, sulfur, and mercury are also used as symbolic and metaphorical representations of different aspects of the self. They're often used to describe the different components of the psyche and how they relate to the process of individuation, which is the process of integrating the conscious and unconscious aspects of the self. Salt is associated with the archetype of the wise old man and represents the solid, stable aspect of the self. It is associated with the rational, logical, and objective aspect of the psyche and with the ability to integrate the different aspects of the self. Sulfur is associated with the archetype of the anima and represents the fiery, passionate aspect of the self. It is associated with the emotional, intuitive, and subjective aspect of the psyche and with the ability to transform the self. As much regarding the anima and regarding salt, because I'm looking at it from a masculine perspective. Regarding salt, it can as much be the wise old man, can be the animus, and with sulfur it can be the wise old woman in a switched form. Mercury is associated with the archetype of the trickster and represents the fluid, changeable aspect of the self. So it is associated with the creative, spontaneous, and adaptable aspect of the psyche and the ability to communicate with the unconscious. And then within alchemy, there's also, several phases, nigrido, albedo, citrinitas, and rubido, how you can see here. And these are several phases that are often described in the literature as part of the great work or the process of spiritual transformation and the attainment of spiritual enlightenment. The phases and their associated processes can be they vary depending on the text or tradition, but the commonly recognized phases that also Jung used is, like I mentioned, nigrido, albedo, citrinitas, and rubido. Nigrido or blackening is the first phase, and it represents the process of dissolution and death. It is associated with the concept of the prima materia, which is the raw, undifferentiated substance that contains the potential for all forms of matter. This phase is also associated with the concept of the shadow, or the unconscious aspect of the self, which needs to be acknowledged and integrated. And within this phase, there's often a splitting that happens from prima materia into the parts, which forms consciousness and unconsciousness in this split. And then there's this need of this process of shadow work to reintegrate it. Then you have albedo or whitening. The second phase represents the process of purification and rebirth. It is associated with the process of calcination, which is the heating of a substance to a high temperature to drive off impurities. So this phase is also associated with the anima or animus and the awakening of spiritual awareness and the purification of the soul. Then the next one is citrinitas or yellowing, the third phase. And this represents the process of refinement and illumination, and it is associated with the process of sublimation, which is the separation of the pure and impure elements of a substance through heating. In this phase is associated with the wise old man or woman, and the development of self-awareness and the integration of the conscious and unconscious aspects of the self. Where finally the rubido or reddening is the final phase, which represents the process of integration and spiritual transformation, and it is associated with the attainment of spiritual enlightenment, inner harmony, and self-actualization once it is attained in some sense. But even if attained in that sense, it is kind of like a continual journey. And really the way to work on this is firstly to acknowledge and accept your shadow self, identify the parts of yourself that are hidden away, such as negative aspects of your personality and suppressed emotions, coming to the entire journey of individuation, but also to turn inward, pay attention to your inner world, dreams, instincts, and intuition, and then continue to explore your unconscious, So using techniques such as dream analysis, active imagination, and free association to uncover the contents of your unconscious mind. Then really through that become aware of archetypes and the different archetypes within the unconscious, which includes the anima, animus, and the shadow, but also all of the other archetypes that I had mentioned earlier in the course as well. I also have like a video playlist of archetypes on the YouTube channel as well that you might want to check out if you're interested in looking more deeply into the archetypes. And really it's about to recognize these within your personality and understand how they influence your behavior, and finally develop a relationship between conscious and unconscious to integrate aspects of the unconscious into everyday life by acknowledging their importance and allowing them to shape our behavior, thoughts, and decisions. Just making sure that you get rid of those nasty complexes first. Then there's also something I want to add about individuation, and this is a quote by Jung himself. There's often said something like, in modern psychology, or like generally, it's seen as if like individuation happens in of itself, but taking away, like here with Jung's quote here, it says, strictly speaking, the process of individuation is real only if the individual is aware of it and consequently makes a living connection with it. We do not know whether the pine tree is aware of its own growth, whether it enjoys and suffers the different vicissitudes that shape it, but man certainly is able to participate consciously in its development. He even feels that from time to time, by making free decisions, he can cooperate actively with it. This cooperation belongs to the process of individuation in the narrower sense of the word. Then now coming to the ages and individuation, because it is something important to highlight. Because I already talked now in this introductory section about like Carl Jung's model and its connection to alchemy. But within the context of the course, I will also be talking about the pre-Mesopotamian model, linked to like Göbekli Tepe, what came after, but also the Indo-European model, the Egyptian model, the mystery school model, the Buddhist model, and Christian model. And and then in modernity, really like looking back at it all and looking at our current situation. And these different models that you can see here also are all connected to each other in different ways, which I will also talk about throughout the course and really show how these are kind of interrelated and connected throughout these different ages, but also how that all connects within each age to bring that up, and how each age in its own way is also its own specific way of looking at individuation, and these are different lenses, but they together form a greater whole, which can be then talked about way later in the modernity section as well. And then to also add, the reason why I cover the ones mentioned here on the slide, and not, for instance, a Latin American, Australian Aboriginal model and other such models, is firstly for the sake of the length of the course. Secondly, it falls outside the focus of the course, which is about Western civilization and its roots. And finally, these other models, including also other modern Western and non-Western models, fall outside my area of expertise. So they will be admitted, but I do want to point out that these other models do exist out there, and different conceptions of this. So you have to keep this in mind, that this is going to be from a Jungian perspective. If you're interested in joining the course, you can do so by hopping over to Patreon. You have there the first tier support box already includes the History of Consciousness course, It's roughly it is €5, roughly $5. And then you have the other tiers, which are optional with some merch. And by joining this, already the first tier, you get access to the full first episode, the full second episode, and all future episodes that will be coming out every month as well, going into the ages. Hey!